and welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Eun-Jung Cho. The United States is seeking a unified condemnation of North Korea's missile provocations at the United Nations. But China, Russia, and North Korea are attempting to shift the blame on the U.S. Today, we discuss ways to hold North Korea accountable for its provocations and offer more robust extended deterrence to South Korea.
DPRK has flagrantly violated Security Council resolutions and attempted to undermine the global non-proliferation regime.
The last Security Council resolution, 2397, which was adopted unanimously in 2017, explicitly decided to take action.
美国应采取主动，展现诚意，提出现实可行的方案，正面回应朝方合理关切。
In the studio with me, Ambassador Joseph DeTrani, former special envoy for the six-party talks during the Bush administration. Ambassador DeTrani also served as the director of National Counterproliferation Center and associate director of National Intelligence. Also joining us, Mr. Robert Einhorn, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. Mr. Einhorn served as special advisor for nonproliferation and arms control at the State Department and assistant secretary of state for nonproliferation. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Ambassador DeTrani, the UN Security Council failed to pass a resolution on North Korea's latest ICBM testing, and now the U.S. is going for a presidential statement. Now, there's been 10 UN Security Council meetings this year without any substantial results. Did we reach end of an era of UN sanctions on North Korea?
No, I don't think so. I think there needs to be consequences. The UN Security Council resolutions were passed with the concurrence and certainly the approval of China and the Russian Federation. So we need to persist. There needs to be consequences for North Korea's pursuit and violation of Security Council resolutions. And you mentioned this past year, over 63 missile launches, the ICBM launches. Of course, there needs to be consequences on that.
Now, Ambassador Einhorn, Security Council is the preeminent forum for keeping international peace and security, but that is increasingly getting paralyzed. What other ways to draw up pressure on North Korea without going through UN?
I agree with Joe that North Korea must be held accountable, but I am skeptical that it will be held accountable in the United Nations. North Korea has become a strategic ally of China and Russia. And I think they are prepared to use their veto power in order to shield North Korea from pressures. There's the option of U.S. unilateral sanctions, and they could provide additional pressure. But I don't think those unilateral sanctions are going to change the course of North Korea's programs. I think China remains an important player. I think they have probably the most influence on North Korea, but even their influence is limited. Interestingly, when President Biden met recently with Xi Jinping, he tried to persuade China to play a more constructive role. And specifically, he said that if North Korea's programs go unconstrained, then the United States will be forced to take actions that China doesn't like,
right.
Including increasing U.S. military presence in the region.
Right.
So that may be one way, without going through the UN, of applying some pressure on North Korea.
Right, right. Ambassador DeTrani, the military presence in Northeast Asia, there's been trilateral military exercises and strategic assets were deployed, like nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, B-1B bombers. What more can be done, though? I mean, we've seen a lot of things, and then the three leaders also agreed on sharing the missile warning data simultaneous in real time. But what more can be done?
Well, a lot is being done. You just described a lot is being done. Putting those strategic assets in place, that's a powerful message certainly to North Korea, but also to China and the region. I mean, China can't be happy with that scenario. What more can be done? Well, I think further enhancing the if you will, deterrence in that regard by deploying military assets, but also intelligence sharing. There was some talk in the past about Five Eyes. This is the special relationship the U.S. has with our very close allies, to include, Australia, including Japan and indeed the Republic of Korea, where we share that much more, we come that much closer together. And I think even going beyond that, I mean, we talked about the Quad, we talked about security, relationships in the region that speak to the security of the Republic of Korea, but also Japan and the region.
So these strategic assets, what signal is the strategic asset deployment sending to the Pyongyang regime that the regime can be taken out anytime?
Well, that's part of the message. That's what deterrence is about. If you go beyond the pale, if you go beyond that red line, if you should use your strategic assets, North Korea's, if you will, whether it's nuclear or high-end conventional, there will be consequences, and the consequences could be kinetic consequences, and that's why those assets are in the region. They could be deployed, they could be used. So when the president and others speak about, you don't want to go that way, North Korea, you don't want to go down that path, because it could be the end of the regime. Implicit in that is deploying and using those strategic assets. Mm-hmm. Obviously, no one wants to go down that path. We don't want to see that happen, but that's a possibility.
Ambassador DeTrani, you were with CIA, you were Northeast Asia director. Does CIA have the track down Kim Jong-un's information real time, where he is and what he's up to?
Let me tell you, although North Korea is literally a black hole in many ways, the information that we have on North Korea is pretty compelling. It's compelling in regards to their deployments, in regards to their major facilities, in regards to the leadership elements and so forth. There's a lot of information that is available to the United States and certainly to our allies and close partners. So yes, I think we are well informed. We could be doing better, but we are well informed.
Ambassador Einhorn, so you just mentioned how North Korea and Russia and China are now strategic partners. Now, in blocking punitive actions against North Korea, what's the benefit for China and Russia?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, look, I remember in the 2000s during the six-party talks, and Joe knows this very well because he played a central role in the U.S. approach to the six-party talks. China and Russia, but mostly China, were our negotiating partners in many respects. We worked with China to develop negotiating positions. China tried to sell those positions to the North Koreans. They played a constructive role. That has changed completely. And I think now China and Russia may see some strategic benefit in allying with North Korea. Russia and China on a global basis is trying to counter American influence, American clout. This is important to them. And they may see North Korea as an asset in countering their influence. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's becoming difficult to deal with them. I mean, and now we even have evidence now that North Korea is providing military supplies to Russia in its invasion of Ukraine. So Russia may see benefit in supporting North Korea and shielding it from punishment, because it may now be a recipient of military supplies from North Korea.
There was a view for a long time that North Korea's nuclear development is against China's national interest, against Russia's national interest. Is that no longer the case?
I don't know if China and Russia see it that way to the extent that they saw it that way in the past. In principle, I don't think China and Russia want North Korea to have nuclear weapons. But I think at this point, they may believe that North Korea's nuclear capability is not going to be reversed. And they may calculate that as long as North Korea is going to have nuclear weapons, they might as well be on our side rather than the side of the United States and its allies. They certainly are not playing an active role in trying to rein in North Korean nuclear and missile capabilities at this point. Will they become even more tolerant of North Korea's nuclear capability? I don't know. I hope not.
Ambassador DeTrani, a school of thought argues that U.S. should openly acknowledge the nuclear deterrence relationship that exists between Pyongyang and Washington and pursue risk reduction negotiations with the premise that both sides hold a shared interest in averting nuclear war. What are your thoughts about this argument, and where is denuclearization in this picture?
I think denuclearization needs to be central. It's the core issue, complete, verifiable denuclearization. That needs to be central. There's been a lot of talk about arms control. There's been a lot of talk about accepting North Korea as a nuclear weapon state. That would be, in my view, a terrible mistake, because we're talking about nuclear proliferation. Other countries will seek nuclear weapons, and the possibility of nuclear weapons or fissile material getting into the hands of terrorist organizations. So that's going down the wrong path. However, this is not a binary issue. We could seek both.
Ambassador Einhorn, there are some even saying we should even give up the goal of denuclearization. What are your thoughts?
I agree with Joe completely. I think that would be a huge mistake. I think it would be a spur to proliferation worldwide. I think it would be terribly demoralizing to our South Korean and Japanese allies. No, we should retain the goal. Call it an ultimate goal, an eventual goal, whatever you want to call it. But that remains the goal, a complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But right now, what is the highest priority? With Kim Jong-un threatening to use nuclear weapons preemptively, with near clashes with North Korea shooting missiles south of the northern limit line, huge barrages of artillery into the buffer zone, there's instability now. And I think the top priority now is reducing the risk of nuclear conflict, conventional and nuclear conflict. That should be the priority, even though we retain the goal of complete denuclearization.
Verification is very important, and during Hanoi, the Trump administration had extensive information about the Yongbyon nuclear complex and even the clandestine Kangsong complex. So does the U.S. have the ability to determine the veracity of North Korean nuclear declaration list?
You have to break that up into pieces. If Yongbyon, the nuclear complex at Yongbyon, were shut down, the IAEA is familiar with Yongbyon. They could go back in and have high confidence that no fissile material was being produced. If the North Koreans were prepared to declare the previously undeclared facility at Kangsong, then the IAEA could come in and be very confident that no production was taking place there. The problem comes when you try to extend those constraints, a total ban on fissile material production nationwide. That's more difficult to do. That would require the North Koreans to make an honest and comprehensive declaration of all their facilities and permit the IAEA to come in and inspect. That's going to be difficult. But I think you have to proceed in stages. Start with Yongbyon, maybe one or two currently undeclared facilities, and then broaden it from there.
But not only IAEA, but United States has intelligence abilities, has satellite imageries. Does the U.S. have information about North Korea's nuclear facilities?
I'm not privy to recent information. I haven't had that information for quite some time, but my guess is that the U.S. has some sense through its national technical means of where North Korea may be doing certain things. Does it have a comprehensive picture? I would tend to doubt that. The North Koreans are masters at tunneling underground and concealing activities, but I think the U.S. has a significant amount of information about what's going on in the nuclear and missile realm.
I totally agree with everything Bob has said. there's no question we have good insight into where these facilities are. And that was the problem, I think, in Hanoi, because the president said it's more than Yongbyon. And there are other facilities you have. And certainly these are highly enriched uranium facilities. And that's always been the key. North Korea concealing those highly enriched uranium facilities, a second path for nuclear weapons. And that was the problem with the, if you will, with the six-party talks and the joint statement, where they wouldn't permit our monitors to leave the Yongbyon facility and visit suspect facilities, non-declared suspect facilities. So that's key. So yes, I totally agree. We do know where the other facilities are, and we can confirm when we ask for a complete declaration, as we did in the six-party talks, if North Korea is not being truthful, we will know that.
Now, I want to turn to the issue of better defending South Korea from the North Korean nuclear threat. Mr. Einhorn, in a recent forum in Washington, D.C., you said you're wondering whether the meeting of a extended deterrence working group was sufficient for Seoul. What do you mean by that, and what specific step could be taken to further strengthen extended deterrence provided to South Korea?
There have been recent high-level meetings, a meeting between Minister Lee and Secretary Austin in the Security Consultative meeting. There have been meetings of this specialized extended deterrence group also. I think South Koreans highly value these contacts and believe significant progress is being made between the Biden and Yoon administrations, both of which strongly support, the extended deterrent. But I also think South Koreans would like to see more progress done. And these bilateral mechanisms provide an opportunity to do that. How can we improve the extended deterrent? I think it would be very important for politicians of both the Democratic and Republican Party to express their strong support for the alliance and for strengthening the extended deterrent. I think South Koreans have lost some confidence after some of the policies of the Trump administration toward the alliance. And I think if Republican leaders came out and said, we strongly support the alliance and for strengthening extended deterrence, that would be important. I also think it's important for the U.S. To more frequently and persistently deploy U.S. strategic assets to the region, to highly visible demonstrations of resolve, such as the aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan making a call at Busan, the flyovers of the peninsula by U.S. strategic bombers. But I think a very important thing is for our South Korean allies to be given a more prominent role than they now have in discussions about extended deterrence policies, and also a more prominent voice in any crisis communications that might affect the U.S. extended deterrent. I think these are some of the things that can be done.
So prominent role as in more prominent role in nuclear planning, in the use of nuclear planning.
Well, nuclear planning has a specific technical meaning to the United States military, but I think there can be a more equal discussion of nuclear policies affecting the extended deterrent than you have right now. There are many South Koreans who talk about replicating NATO's nuclear planning arrangements. The situations are quite different. I don't think you can take NATO arrangements and apply them to East Asia. But I think that a more significant role, both of South Korean and of Japanese, in the policy-making process and in crisis communications would be valuable.
Ambassador DeTrani, a ruling party in South Korea, they have a special committee on responding to North Korea's nuclear crisis. They drew up a report recently and talked about a secret project to pursue secure nuclear armament potential, specifically by reviewing nuclear armament pathway that do not breach South Korea's agreement with the U.S. nor NPT. Now, what are your thoughts about that secret project and these specific and strong desire coming out from Seoul? Does that drive Washington to more actively seek ways to strengthen extended deterrence to South Korea?
Well, I think we're doing that. I think we are strengthening that strategic deterrence relationship with the Republic of Korea. That's happening as we speak. I'm not in support of any secret programs to pursue something that would be even viewed as in violation of the NPT, or certainly pursuing nuclear weapons capability, whether it's strategic, whether it's tactical nuclear weapons, or facilities that could be activated if in need of nuclear weapons capability. So, no, I think we need to be transparent with ourselves. And I think once we get into a path where we're elements of this allied relationship moves into secret pursuits of other capabilities, I think then we would lose trust. And what we have now is trust with the UN and the Biden administration's very close working relationship.
If Seoul pursues nuclear armament and develops self-nuclear weapons, will the U.S. sanction South Korea?
Well, going back to the 70s, South Korea did pursue a nuclear weapons capability. And the U.S. Correctly, I believe, told South Korea, this is not what you want to do. We have extended nuclear deterrence commitments to the Republic of Korea. And certainly now we're talking about strengthening those extended nuclear deterrence commitments to South Korea. You don't want to pursue a secret path or your own nuclear weapons capability. So what would the U.S. do in a case like that? Hopefully we never get to that point. Hopefully South Korea doesn't pursue that path towards nuclear weapons, and it should be in dialogue with the United States.
Ambassador Einhorn, do you anticipate U.S. sanctions or UN sanctions on South Korea if it pursues nuclear weapons, or will it receive, at the end of the day, impunity like India, Pakistan, and Israel?
First of all, there's a mistaken impression about India and Pakistan. I was involved in negotiations with the Indians and Pakistanis after their 1998 nuclear weapon tests. Those tests triggered automatically some very harsh sanctions called the Glenn Amendment. And what that meant was cutoff of all economic and military assistance, cutoff of all military sales and transfers, cutoff of supporting those countries in international financial. It went across the board. It was draconian. And one of the things about the Glenn Amendment is there's no presidential waiver. It requires both houses of Congress to support a waiver. So these sanctions were on India and Pakistan for quite some time. So if South Korea decided to acquire nuclear weapons, withdraw from the NPT, conduct a nuclear test, there would be real consequences, including the triggering of this Glenn Amendment sanction, but also if South Korea left the NPT, members of the nuclear suppliers group would be committed to cutting off all nuclear cooperation with South Korea. South Korea depends on nuclear energy for a large percentage of its electricity. It has no domestic capability, no uranium. It gets all of its enriched fuel from abroad. This will be stopped. South Korea's civil nuclear energy program would come to a halt, and there would be other consequences as well.
Before we go, Ambassador DeTrani, so South Korea developing its own weapons, Japan will likely follow suit. This nuclear proliferation in Northeast Asia, would that somehow pressure China and Russia to more actively restrain North Korea's nuclear development?
No, I think that's a very good point. Indeed, that should be the case. And I think it is the case with the People's Republic of China. I think China is not interested in North Korea, and Bob said that early on, of pursuing and retaining nuclear weapons for that reason, because it would encourage Japan and others to pursue nuclear, and that's not in China's interest.
Well, on that note, we'll have to wrap it up here. Ambassador Einhorn, Ambassador DeTrani, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back here next week with U.S. experts to talk about the two Koreas and the region right here from Washington.